friends, it's Jordan and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about all of the books that I read in February. February was a much more successful reading month in comparison to January. I read so many more books and I had just such a better time in comparison. Not that really I could have gone any lower after January. The first book that I read in February was Deadly Little Scandals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, which is the sequel and concluding novel to Little White Lies, which is her debutante series. I absolutely love Jennifer Lynn Barnes, especially her young adult mystery thriller novels. I have read The Naturals by her, The Fixer by her, and then this as well. And I would say that they are all fairly similar in the same wheelhouse. So if you like one of these series, then I would recommend to check out the others. This one follows debutantes, as the name suggests, and it definitely has a like Gilmore Girls meets Pretty Little Liars meets Gossip Girl kind of vibe to it. We have the main character Sawyer, who has lived alone with her mom for her entire life, but her mom does hail from a very wealthy, affluent Southern family, similar to Rory and Lorelai and Emily from the Gilmore Girls. She's plucked out of her small town life and taken to live with her grandma in the first book because her grandma offers her a college tuition if she comes and lives with her and goes through her debutante year. She's also on the down low searching for her father, someone that she doesn't know anything about, doesn't know their name, doesn't know their identity, getting into these wild shenanigans and are involved in these crazy like murder crime plots and just something that a normal teenagers would never be involved in, but somehow these four girls that were following Sawyer and then three of the other girls in her debutante year are consistently finding themselves in and seem to be like nonplussed by the entire situation. Very similar to Pretty Little Liars. I really enjoyed this sequel. I think if you enjoyed the first one and you had fun with it, then you will enjoy and like the sequel. They're pretty comparable in that sense. It was filled with so many high society twists and turns that I never saw coming. And I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this one. So after that, we're getting into my Contemporary-a-thon wrap up, which I edited my Contemporary-a-thon vlog today and it was terrible. And I'm very sorry that I just dropped the ball so aggressively on that whole thing. If I talk about like any of the books that I read in that video or my feelings on anything, I'm very sorry. But the first book that I read for Contemporary-a-thon was Love Her or Lose Her by Tessa Bailey. This is the sequel to Fix Her Up. And in this one we follow Rosie and Dominic, who are high school sweethearts who get married right before he leaves to go into the military. He's been home from the military for about 5 years now. They've been together for about 10 and their marriage just isn't what they expected it to be. They've lost their connection. So as a last ditch attempt to save their marriage, they go to this marriage counseling through this very hippie alternative out there type of couples therapy. I loved this so much. I have seen nothing but like lukewarm to bad reviews for this on Goodreads. Everybody that I've seen have given it a 2.5 star. No one seems to be enjoying this. I will say Dominic is a pretty heavy alpha male character and he's pretty possessive over Rosie. I feel like they did a pretty good job of exploring his backstory and explaining why he was like that. Not that it's an excuse or a good reason to behave that way, but I felt like it at least gave us a reason for why Dominic was behaving the way that he was. And I feel like he grew enough over the book that I wasn't really bothered by it. I felt like he had enough of a character arc that by the end he had dealt with some of these issues. I just was really personally moved by this book. I have been with my boyfriend since high school as well, and he went into the military after high school. I understood where Rosie and Dominic were coming from. These were like similar things that I had experienced and I just felt really connected to them, and I loved this book so freaking much. My eyes won't stop twitching. I don't know what's happening. I don't think this is a book for everybody though. It's one of my favorite romance books that I have ever read and I can't wait to read more in the series. I just loved this so much. I'm excited, so excited for the next one that comes out later this year. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read for Contemporary-a-thon was A Princess in Theory. My eyes won't stop twitching, by Alyssa Cole, and this was also the pick for the House Salt book club for February. This is a royals romance. We are following Naledi, who is a graduate student in New York going to school for epidemiology. And at the start of the novel, she's receiving all of these, what she thinks are spam emails, trying to convince her that she's a princess. One day at her job, this new guy shows up who she assumes is the new hire, but it's actually Thabiso, who is the prince that she is supposedly betrothed to according to these emails, but she does not know that it is Thabiso. I really liked Naledi as a main character. I thought she was very assertive and feisty, and she's a woman in STEM, a Black woman in STEM, and she's very much knows what she wants in life and she goes after it, and she's very independent. And I really liked her character. Viso was fine. He didn't like stand out to me any negative or positively. I don't really have any strong feelings towards him either way. The relationship was fine. I also felt like the book was kind of split into two different sections in like a weird way. Like we had the first section of the book that was focused in New York, and then there's a second half that was focused in Africa. And I liked them both separately, but they didn't feel to like merge together very well. It was like two very disjointed halves of the book. I really enjoyed all the side characters. There are so many fun side characters, and all of them have some kind of spin-off novel or novella in the series, so I definitely want to continue with those. Also read a lot like Black Panther fan fiction. I ended up giving this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I will link our live show that we had for this book if you'd like to go and listen to all of us discuss it together and talk about our feelings, because there was a wide array of feelings. The next book that I read for Contemporary-a-thon was The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker. I have been wanting to read this for a very long time. I don't know why it took me so long to finally pick it up. This is a novel that takes place primarily in Alaska. We have our main character, Kala, who lives in Toronto with her mom and her stepdad. Her mom moved away from Alaska when she was just an infant, and she really has had no relationship with her biological father since then. But then she gets a call one day from someone in Alaska saying that her father is ill and that she should come out and spend some time with him because she might not get to do that again in the future. Packs up all of her bags, decides to fly to Alaska, and when she gets there, she is just a fish out of water. This is a born and bred city girl to a pretty affluent family. Now she's in the wilderness of Alaska. Just watching her adapt to it and come to, by the end of the book, like appreciate it and have a fondness for it was beautiful, and also was just incredibly wildly entertaining watching her try to cope with life in a very remote Alaskan town. While she's there, she meets this bush pilot who is a cowboy of the sky, Jonah, who works at her father's company, and they strike up an unconventional relationship, and I loved them so unbelievably much. They had the perfect hate to love, bicker, bantering, misunderstanding kind of relationship. He didn't understand her, she didn't understand him. They were constantly at heads with each other. They did not get along, and then over the course of the book, they softened to each other, and I loved it so much. I loved her relationship with everybody else in Alaska, with her stepdad back home. There is nothing about this book that I didn't love. I already have the sequel for this book. I cannot wait to dive into it and read it. I'm very nervous because it's a direct sequel, so that means that my precious children are going to go through some more turmoil, and I just want them to be happy. I'll read this again in the future because it was incredible. My camera died. It's been some time. It's 9:30 at night. I'm exhausted. The next book I read was a reread for me, and that was Lord of Shadows by Cassandra Clare. I read this book right when it came out in 2017, I believe, and I hated this book. Hated it. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, but I feel like it was really more of like a 1.5 to 2. Like, I really did not like this book at all. I read it at a very difficult time in my life. Like, I feel like what I was going through in my life really impacted my enjoyment of this book, because I just remember being so disappointed by everything that happened in here. This is the second book in the trilogy for The Dark Artifices. In The Dark Artifices, we are following Emma and Julian, who are characters that you meet in City of Heavenly Fire. In this book, there are 17. They're in the Los Angeles Institute. I don't even like really know what I can say without spoiling, because there's so many books in the series, and this is so far deep into the series. There have been some things happening with the fairy courts as a result of what happened in the Mortal Instruments, and so like they are trying to deal with some like fairy politics, and there's a impending curse upon the two of them. I reread this. I don't know what spurred, actually I do. Chain of Gold comes out in March, and I love the Infernal Devices so much. So I've been waiting for The Last Hours for what feels like a million years. And I know you don't have to read these to read those, but I want to read everything in publication order. So I was like, man, if I'm going to read Chain of Gold, I have to get caught up on The Dark Artifices. I have to suck it up and read them. So I reread this, and I had such a more enjoyable experience with this the second time around. I enjoyed this immensely. I read this very quickly in comparison to the first time. I was so invested. I loved the character dynamics. I didn't have like any of the same complaints I had the first time. It really goes to show that like reading the book at the wrong time really affects how you feel about a book. I'm very happy and glad that I gave it a second chance and that I reread it, because I really did enjoy it and I really loved the characters, and it actually encouraged me to continue reading the other books in the series. So that's exactly what I did. I ended up bumping up my rating for this to a 4 out of 5 stars, and previously it was like bottom of the barrel. The last and final book, which is the same thing, the last and the final book that I read in February, was Ghosts of the Shadow Market by Cassandra Clare and several other authors. This is a bind-up of novellas in the Shadowhunter world, and the theme storyline for this particular bind-up is that we are following Brother Zachariah as he is traveling to different shadow markets across time and across the world. The first 8 of the 10 stories in this bind-up were released as ebooks before Queen of Air and Darkness came out. So I read the first 8 books in this bind-up. The final 2 novellas in this bind-up were released when the bind-up was released. And so they were meant to be read further down the publication line. And I think that would be after Queen of Air and Darkness and the Red Scrolls of Magic, so I will read them later down the line. This isn't my favorite bind-up, I think I still like Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy better, but I really did enjoy this. There were only a few of the 8 that I wasn't really feeling. I feel like maybe 2 of the 8 just I didn't find to be very like engaging or enjoyable, but overall engaged and enjoyed all the stories. I was much more drawn to the stories that were focusing on Tessa, Jem, Will, and their children, because that is just where I thrive in the Shadowhunter world. I love Jem, Tessa, and Will storylines. I love the storylines of the other characters from the Infernal Devices and of their children. And I don't necessarily care as much for like Clary, Jace, and the characters from the Mortal Instruments. My lowest rating ones from this bind-up were Cast Long Shadows. That was the lowest one that I rated. That was the first one. That was 2.5 stars. And then I did have a couple 4 stars. A Deeper Love and The Wicked Ones, and then Through Blood, Through Fire were 3 that I really enjoyed. I give all those 4 stars. I'm looking forward to continuing into Queen of Air and Darkness and everything else into March. March is going to be a very heavy Shadowhunter month. I already can feel it. In total, I end up giving this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. But that is it. I had some really great ones in there. I had some that I feel like might end up on my favorite books of the year list. Love Her or Lose Her and Simple Wild were just absolutely phenomenal, and I could definitely see these popping up again later on in the year when we do our favorites lists. I would love to know what you guys read for the month of February. Please tell me in the comments down below what your favorite book was. Thank you guys so much for what am I trying to say? Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, I will talk to you very soon. Bye. I am so tired. I have been up for 14 hours, 15 hours. I really want to go to sleep.